Hi everyone, it's Adam and Jill from the Professional Book Nerds podcast, and we are starting something a little bit new today. This is our first ever PBN Chat kind of video edition of our podcast. So
Yay!
It'll be a little bit shorter. It won't be specifically book recommendations or author interviews. It's going to be all the conversations that bookish people like to have amongst themselves, the hot debates and things like that. So people talking about whether or not they want to have a love triangle in their YA book, or if you prefer standalone books to series. We're not going to answer obvious questions like is audiobooks reading, because it is, obviously.
Obviously.
We probably won't do too many like ebook versus physical book debates because we love both. So
We do love both.
well, everyone in our office would just be like, yeah, end of video, all reading is good. So it'll be the two of us. It'll be some other people that you've heard on the podcast before but may not have seen before, and we're going to see how this goes. So again, a lot of times it'll be bookish questions, but sometimes it might be kind of like a challenge. For example, one of the two people may not like a specific type of book or thing, and then the other one will try to kind of convince them. So Jill, what are we talking about today for our first kickoff?
So if people listen to our podcast, they know that you are a huge Charles Dickens fan.
I am.
I don't really like Charles Dickens. It's not even just Charles Dickens. I don't really like anything that's in the sort of English language canon.
Mm-hmm.
I find the language sort of challenging and inaccessible, and the stories don't really interest me, and so I need you to tell me why I should read it.
All right, so I love classic literature so much that I, without realizing we were going to be doing this morning, wore my Dracula t-shirt.
It's true.
I'm so into classic English literature content. So what I have, these are notes, you can't see them. I have notes as to why you should be reading Charles Dickens.
Okay.
And so what we'll do, I'll go through some of these notes. I'm going to try and convince Jill. I'm probably going to fail. But hopefully some of these things will, even if the stories of themselves don't interest you, maybe the background as to what Charles Dickens means to society will help. That was very hoity-toity of me. Okay.
It's a little bit.
First thing, and I think people don't realize this, Charles Dickens basically created what we know as Christmas today. Did you know this?
I did not know that.
So you can thank two things for Christmas as we understand it today: Coca-Cola and Charles Dickens.
Coca-Cola, I know.
Coca-Cola for what Santa Claus looks like and the red and the white and everything. So before Charles Dickens wrote A Christmas Carol, Christmas wasn't celebrated at all. Like there were businesses in London that they'd be open during the day and they'd have like meetings, and it wasn't celebrated at all. Christmas Carol comes out and people start to understand like, oh, it's this huge celebration with these families and being merry and drinking and having a good time together, and it became literally a holiday. Like, the idea that this story completely changed the world, or at least the Western Hemisphere mainly, about how they celebrate Christmas. That's not a reason why you should read all of his books, but I'm going to tell you at the end of this a nice introduction to Charles Dickens, to give him a shot, is to read A Christmas Carol, because it's super short. So just the idea, I love Christmas very, very much. And the idea that how we look at Christmas today, this one is not selling you on it at all.
No.
But that's okay.
I can appreciate the historical value of that, but that's not really...
That's
and
okay.
I know the story of the Christmas Carol, obviously, who doesn't? But
you know, probably through like A Muppet Christmas Carol and growing up in every other version that you probly saw.
Right.
Okay, that's okay. This one, that was an apropos.
There was that Saved by the Bell episode.
Yes, there is. Okay, a few things that he did that I don't think a lot of people realize. He established the idea of writing about like abject poverty, and in a way that he wrote stories from the people who are suffering abject poverty, put it in how they are going through life. And obviously there were people before him and after him that have done this as well. But he took these characters, like Oliver Twist, for example, as a young boy growing up on the streets, and he turned it into people that you could relate to no matter where you came from. Because I'm not a big fan of Victorian, like, high society books. I'm not a huge Jane Austen fan. I don't love anything that has to do with like a court or a crown. It's a big issue in our house. My wife loves all those things.
See, that I like.
Right. But I don't love all those things, but I love all of like the common person stories. So all these stories from people who, if you read, this happens a lot now with like commentary about politics and stuff today. Like if you see people who can look at something that's going on and basically be honest about how things are actually happening. Like Charles Dickens was one of the first people to kind of attack the courts and society for how they were running things. And that to me is very important. And there's a lot of the way that I think you see responses to things like the well thought out, like when you see Ta-Nehisi Coates writing a well thought out piece about what's going on in America. Ta-Nehisi Coates probably would have done that had Charles Dickens never existed, but Charles Dickens was the first person to do that sort of thing.
Alright.
Warming up a little bit?
Maybe.
Okay. Another big thing, a massive amount of modern comedy today is based on the way Charles Dickens would do his readings. Before him, authors might do readings, but it was very much like, if you hear people talk about the difference between a narrator of an audiobook and a voice cast of an audiobook, Charles Dickens was like the first voice cast of his own stories. So instead of just going on there and reading, like coming out there and being like, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, and reading, he actually would act out his stories for people, and he would emote, and he would basically, he would show people that like, you could read a scene a certain way and it would just sound fine, or you could read a certain way and you realize the humor behind it. So he was one of these first people, and there's a lot of comedians who actually will tell you like, two of their biggest literary influences are Mark Twain and Charles Dickens. And so to me, seeing the importance of where all this comes from is why I like reading his stories. The main reason though, because I'm not selling you all on any of these reasons, that's okay.
Really.
Tell people, how about this? Tell people why you don't like reading classic literature.
Like the real reason.
Yeah.
I find it kind of boring. I find it kind of boring. And again, like I find the language somewhat challenging in terms of just because the structure of the English language at that time is different than what we have now. So I find it a little. It feels like homework. It feels like homework.
Okay.
Like it feels like I'm in English class again. I did that in high school and college.
Okay, but when you were in like English classes, did you guys read modern stories? Like you are clearly a lover of books and reading. So how did you sort of like, not how did you fall in love with reading, but like how did you come to decide what types of books that you like? Like you're a huge Stephen King fan, and
right.
You love.
Because his books entertain me and aren't boring.
But there was like an introduction to it at some point, wasn't there? Like.
I don't remember.
Okay.
Like I just sort of
okay.
like no, like I was a kid who just picked random books from the library,
Okay.
and I was like, oh, Stephen King, I've heard of him, and I was probably like 13.
So for me, I understand where the stories. I understand that the stories are boring because that's where I get with like the Jane Austen books. That's how I feel about those types of stories. They're boring to me, so I get that. But when I think of like Dracula or A Tale of Two Cities or Frankenstein, like to me those stories aren't boring. I understand that definitely the English that they use is challenging.
Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's not so much that they're boring, but because of the language, they feel dry.
Okay, and that's fair. But to me, what that forces me to do, because as a reader, especially with our job where we're always interviewing people, I'm always struggling to like, I need to get through books as quickly as I can. I need to make sure that I'm getting this stuff into my brain, and so I'll listen to audiobooks really quickly, or I'll find myself skimming through books now and then, like I'll read the first and last sentence of each paragraph to kind of like just get through the books faster. I find myself when I'm reading classic literature, it forces me to sit down and actually read through this thing, like read through a page, and sometimes read through it again, which yes can be tedious, but I feel like I get a sense of appreciation for stuff. And then when I see other stories that are more modern, I understand where they came from and like their influences and things like that. I'm not gonna convince you on that. Okay, listen, I understand. I'm not gonna convince you.
No, you may not.
That's
I mean
okay.
it like mail from our readers who are just angry that I'm like, no classic
literature. No.
literature.
That's okay. That's a good transition to what so if you guys have thoughts on this, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at ProBookNerds. You can email us at professionalbooknerds@overdrive.com, or you can visit our website, Professional Book Nerds. maybe we'll throw a poll up there about like, are you a fan of classic literature or not?
We could.
I know going in that when we have these conversations, when it's you and I, because we're both stubborn and we spend so much time together.
It's not gonna just be us. It's gonna be the others too.
No, I know, but I think you and I will have a much harder time convincing each other because we are so set in our
probably.
ways with each other. So I
Fair.
think we might be able to change other
Fair.
people's minds. But that was the point of this first one. I knew I wasn't going to be able to convince you, but I wanted to spark a conversation and get people to think about classic literature. So share your thoughts with us. Let us know what you think, and maybe next time I'll be the one who's stubbornly saying no to all of your things.
Entirely possible.
Okay, hope you guys enjoyed this. We'll have many, many more to come. Thanks for watching this first ever PBN chat.